Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and we are back here in Studio 130 for another fun-filled, exciting, action-packed episode of Iowa's premier conservative podcast. We got John and I today, again, just two of us, and we're gonna try and thrill and excite you for the next 20 or 30 minutes. John, how are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Just fine.
Yeah.
Just fine. Okay, good. So we got a lot to talk about, not a lot of time to do it in. So we gotta get right down to business.
Yeah.
You're going to take some time off for the holidays. Is that right?
I am. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, good. I'm not. I'm going to be here slaving away for the taxpayers.
Yeah.
The whole time. But, that's great. What are you looking forward to most over your extended break?
Well, that's a good question. I would have to say, seeing my dog, seeing Alfred.
Yeah. We haven't said hi to Alfred.
No,
in a
we
while.
haven't. No.
Alfred, you're a good boy.
Yeah. Yep.
You wanna say
Yes.
anything to Alfred?
Hi, Alfred.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right. Well, that's great.
He's a listener.
He's one of the original 12 listeners.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. We will take our stats, our analytics numbers, wherever we can get them.
That's right. Yeah.
If it's Alfred, it's Alfred, but whatever. Okay. Well, you've done a lot of work lately, and we've talked about looking forward to the next legislative session, specifically on income taxes. And so I just as a teaser, we're going to move into that and talk about some of the work that you've been doing and try and go a little deeper on some of the things. But you also found this morning another article about who the players might be in a future Trump administration or cabinet.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this was, where did you find this again, John?
This was in the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
For some reason, when you first sent it to me, I thought it was the New York Times. I'm like, what in the world are you doing, John? But so yeah, that's right. Okay, I've got it here. But the conservative coterie behind Trump's second term agenda. First time I've thought of this in terms of a coterie. But that's great. We'll roll with it. Walk me through some of this because I want to set the stage first, John. So there was a piece like this in one of the other national publications. I don't know if it was like Political Playbook or something had a piece on that, and it generated kind of a negative response from the Trump campaign. It's like, hey guys, knock it off.
Yeah.
Because this before we get into this, reads a lot like a lot of people measuring the drapes in the White House. And we got a long way to go before we're getting there, right? I mean, nothing else. First, Donald Trump's got to navigate the primary, which is not over.
That's right.
He's got to navigate the legal challenges he has in front of him, which are far from settled despite what's going on in the U.S. Supreme Court right now, which is fascinating in its own right. And then all that having been said, you'd have to win a general election, which, again, will be a challenge. So I actually agree with the Trump campaign that some of these folks that are trying to angle for jobs in the national media probably need to knock it off and worry about getting their guy elected.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But all those disclaimers aside, tell me about what you found interesting in this piece.
Well, it outlines the some key people who are actually advising the former president during on the campaign trail, and people who are basically served in his administration. And it lists the two key ones. One is the former trade representative, Robert Lighthizer, and then the other one was the director of the Office of Management and Budget, who our friend Vance again worked for.
I was just thinking that as you said that, Yeah,
and is Russ Vought. And they've been helping craft some of Trump's positions on budget and tax issues and trade policy, but also there's an additional list of people who have been advising the former president. One is Kevin Hassett, who was the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and he was one of the really architects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And then also a friend of ours and a friend of this program, Matt Whitaker, former acting attorney general.
Correct.
Is another advisor who's been helping the former president in terms of policy, and could see him in a possible future administration.
Yeah, look, Matt's a longtime friend of mine and former law partner, and he is clearly working close with not just the campaign but the former president, and has been very very active with the campaign. If you've gone to a Trump stop in Iowa, you're going to see Matt Whitaker there helping to as part of the warm-up act. And so I think that's, look, I don't have any special inside knowledge other than I know that these folks are all close to the president. I think what'll be interesting is, how do I put it? The whole idea of being kind of anti-establishment, drain the swamp, is you really have to bring a lot of folks that aren't from D.C. And that's a double-edged sword, right?
Yes,
because if you want folks that are outsiders who can come in and make waves, but at the same time, knowing the way it works, that can play the game a little bit can actually make them a lot more effective. So
and one thing I think that this article is neat is that this is it's a powerful list of people, and I would say, as famously Franklin Roosevelt had his brain trust, which were mostly progressives. This is a brain trust, except for pretty solid conservatives who are helping to shape policy and some ideas here. And the article also went on to mention, which I thought was interesting, how there was a lot of fierce debates inside the administration during the first term, and I think they're working on kind of making sure that doesn't happen again, where you have more unified on ideas. For example, and I think Vance shared with us is the issue of the trade and tariffs created a lot of division within the administration. So, but it was just it's a great article and very interesting.
The article here mentioned this with a few other names. The group, which includes Stephen Miller, driver of hardline immigration policies, former Housing Secretary Ben Carson, and John Ratcliffe, former Director of National Intelligence, is stocked with veterans of Trump's first term who are closely aligned with his vision of protectionist economic policies and an isolationist approach to foreign policy.
That was my favorite line of the whole article.
I found it. All right. That's great. Music to John's ears.
Yeah.
I think that, look, one, if this is all the kinds of folks that if Donald Trump becomes president again, he should have people that share his vision around him, and that just goes without saying. Is a Trump-style America First, or MAGA, or whatever you want to call it, is it fair to call it protectionist and isolationist? I mean, at least in terms of the Wall Street Journal writing this, those are very loaded, pejorative terms.
Yeah.
I don't know. Obviously, on the spectrum of what we've become accustomed to in our political debate, at least over our lifetime, I think that is true. It is very much more protectionist and isolation. But is it cast over American history? Is it really a hardcore protectionism and isolationism?
No, it isn't. No. Yeah, one could argue it's protectionism because of the issue of tariffs, which is a protective policy, but it's not anything extreme. And then I would say in terms of foreign policy, it's not isolationist. It's more non-interventionist and more realist in terms of foreign policy. And I think coming from the Wall Street Journal and even other sources, they cast anything that's not neoconservative or neoliberal as isolationist, which isn't fair.
And that's why I asked the question instead of trying to answer my own question, because you were going to nail it a lot better. Look, one of the wins of the Trump administration was the Abraham Accords.
Yes, yeah.
But that is an active foreign policy that takes an interest in what's happening overseas.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's necessarily isolationistic.
No.
It's non-intervention.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, that President Trump has said it specifically with regard to Ukraine. we need to stop the fighting,
Yeah.
and we don't need to be involved in it. Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, there was, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the Wall Street Journal, one of their lead editorials basically said if we don't fund Ukraine, it's going to end up being like a Vietnam disaster on our hands, which, I mean, I think that's just ridiculous myself,
Yeah.
but
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it may. I don't have as strong a feeling about, what the final outcome should be, but I think the United States. I think our national security can be served well by any number of outcomes in Ukraine.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
Because
that's right.
it's not us. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, good. Well, this is yeah, I agree. It's an interesting piece. Yeah, I do think it's important though. Is that one question I get asked a lot is what happens in a Ron DeSantis administration,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think the elephant in the room on that one is, does Governor Kim Reynolds have a role to play?
Yeah.
In that administration? And I don't have any inside knowledge, and I don't think anybody that I talk to really does either. Or if they do, they're not sharing it. I've been led to believe that the governor's endorsement is truly just because she believes that that Governor DeSantis should be the nominee, and it doesn't go any further than that, and isn't angling for something.
And selfishly, I want her to stay governor.
Yeah, no, we're all on Team Kim Reynolds here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's right. It is common in the Iowa caucuses for people to think about what their what position they might get if their candidate wins. I don't think that's what's going on with Governor Reynolds on this one. I think it's just straight up she feels compelled to get involved. Now, that's not to say she may not end up with some role in administration or adjacent to it or something, but I'm with you. I'm supportive of Kim Reynolds staying governor right here in Iowa.
There's so many people that I talk to out of state that just say, boy, we wish we had your governor.
Yeah.
And that's just really encouraging when you hear that.
Yeah. Look, I've heard it suggested that maybe she shouldn't have gotten involved in the caucuses at all. The politically safe thing to do would be to not get involved.
To be neutral, yeah.
And my response is that may or may not be true. I mean, usually politically staying out of the gunfire is a good place to be.
Yeah.
But what led her to get involved in this is not being afraid of the fight. And it's that instinct I think has made her an exceptionally effective governor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think you have to respect it all together.
Yeah.
Is that she's going to get involved in the things she wants to get involved with and is willing to spend political capital to get it done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a fighter.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So absolutely. Okay, good. We agree.
Yeah.
We're usually on safe ground. If
That's
you
right.
And I get through it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about this at the front end of the show, John. I want to talk a little bit. Well, actually, I'd like to talk more than just a little bit about income taxes. And you've been working on a longer piece for ITR Foundation on where we've been, where we're going, and what the impacts would be of Iowa taking the next big step on income taxes. I don't know if I framed that up right or not, but yeah, this is going to be coming out hopefully in the fairly near future.
Yes, yeah.
But I want to talk about it a little bit because it's all fresh in your mind. Tell me about this piece, why it came to be, and what maybe some of your big takeaways are.
Yeah, so as we've been talking about, excuse me, the income tax is going to be a main issue in the session, and of course, the governor and the legislative leaders have all said this. And so what we did is we took a look at basically a couple different scenarios of what potentially what type of reform would look like, and so we partnered with the Buckeye Institute that's based in Ohio, and they have a economic research center that does some tax modeling. And so basically what we did in this paper that hopefully will be released by the end of the year or early January, but we look at, first of all, where have we been in terms, because as you and I have talked about, it's a remarkable story, the progress that Iowa's made on tax reduction. So we kind of look at that and look at how we've gone from one of the highest tax states to one of the more lower tax states, and but then we get into the scenarios, and of course we look at what could be done as the next step. And I think what we see in this report is that we can easily go from our 3.9% flat tax, which is supposed to be phased in 2026, and there is enough built-in budget growth that we can easily bring that down to 2.5%, or maybe even a little bit lower.
Okay, I think this is an important place for us to kind of stop and look around a little bit. So we're on a path. For the current year we're in, 2023, Iowans will pay 6% flat rate. 2024, 5.7, 2025, 4.82, which is a big jump, and then an even bigger jump down to 3.9 in 2026, which would be fully implemented. So that's great. Huge progress. We've talked a lot about it. However, even with these projected numbers and the anticipated reduction in tax receipts off of those numbers, is that Iowa will still collect more in tax revenue than it needs to operate government.
That's it. Yep, that's exactly right.
Now, as you and I were talking about this yesterday, the Revenue Estimating Conference met this week as well. And we knew when they passed the 3.9% flat tax that this worked.
Yes.
That it would cash flow positive in the end. But the series of revenue estimates are even stronger than expected when the bill was passed.
Yes.
And they continue to grow.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about what happened at the REC this week, some of the feedback that was given, and go from there.
Yeah, that's a great point, and this is why we can do further tax reduction, because basically when the REC met this, I think it was Wednesday, they revenue is going to be lower just by 1%, which is not bad at all. In fact, it's the impact is not as big as they thought. And a part of the reason is that, as Director Paulson said during the meeting, is that Iowa's economy is doing very well. And he used the term organic growth. And so basically you are seeing, if you want to call it organic or dynamic growth, as Iowans are spending money, people are investing in the economy, and revenues are stronger as a result. And so we also see, even though the income tax revenue has declined, which the media is making a big deal of it, but what they don't mention, though, is that Iowans are getting to keep that money. And the other thing is that our sales tax continues to be very strong, and our corporate tax continues to be very strong. In fact, it looks like we'll be able to meet the other revenue target for the corporate tax, and we'll probably see that lowered again probably in 2025.
There's another important point I want to make here, John. If you hear in the media that the focus is on declining revenue, and I guess it depends on how they frame that up. It was supposed to reduce revenue.
Yeah.
It was by design.
Yes.
It was completely anticipated. This is no surprise. This is no flaw in the system. When you cut taxes, you take in less than dollars, right?
Yeah.
So if you, there's $200 million less money coming into the state. Yeah. We did that on purpose. And that reduction, that delta, is probably a little bit less than they even planned on because Iowa's economy is strong.
That's right.
So you always gotta be armed with the information and the right frame of reference to understand what you're seeing when it comes out of the media here. It's like, yeah, exactly. There's less money coming in. And
that was a little disappointing because I read quite a few different news stories about the REC meeting, and I was taking notes during it, and both Director Paulson and I believe the appointee from the Legislative Services Agency both made the statement that Iowa is in a strong fiscal foundation. None of that was mentioned. I only saw that in one news story.
Right.
And that was omitted, which kind of made me angry because...
Well, go ahead and finish.
Yeah, because it was, they were trying to distort the results of the REC meeting to make it look more negative than...
Are you going to make that right in the ITR Foundation write-up
Yes,
of the REC?
yeah.
So that
Yeah.
will be covered
Yes,
in that
yeah,
article.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Good. No, that's right. And I look, it's easy to write the article that Iowa's got less income tax revenue coming in than they did before, and just let that sit. But if you're giving folks the information they need, there's the only context that makes sense to that is like, yes, it is exactly what the governor and the legislature set out to do, which was have less money coming in to the state budget. Instead of letting it sit there like somebody broke something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the surpluses are continuing to grow as projected. So we're looking at over $2 billion for fiscal year 24. Yeah. We're looking at a little over $3 billion for fiscal year 2025. Taxpayer Relief Fund will have $3.6 billion in January of 2024. So I mean, this is enormous. The reserve accounts are full at their max levels. And the other thing I find interesting is that people that are critical of the legislature and the governor for supposedly their Ebenezer Scrooge style budget policies, they continually point to these tax and spend agenda. But I think what's interesting is last week and this week is and you and I talked about this, is the news coming out from California and Minnesota of budget deficits. Right. The reckless spending and high taxes are creating a lot of fiscal problems for them. And it's fine for liberals to overpromise everything, but then what happens when that bill comes due?
Right.
And you have these fiscal. But our report is also going to show some modeling that shows that we can do additional tax cuts, and also we show that there will be an impact on the economy because tax rates influence behavior, and that doesn't happen overnight. I want to make that point clear because sometimes we think that the dynamic effect will kick in right away, but I think as we're seeing now, even like Director Paulson said, there is that growth, and certainly as you let more people keep their money, individuals and businesses, that does have an impact.
I think
over the long term.
Yeah, not everyone probably understands what we're talking about. We talk about static modeling and dynamic scoring, and so when you and I are usually talking about the numbers and the surpluses and everything, that's a static model.
Yeah.
Is that if you cut taxes and you bring in $100 million less, it's $100 million less to spend, and that's it. And it's just equals out. And so every time we talk about future budget numbers and balancing the budget and surplus, it's all done in a static model. When the Legislative Services Agency scores a bill, or the Department of Revenue, it's going to be on a static model. We're going to take in less. When we talk about dynamic scoring, it is what you just talked about, John, where if we let Iowans keep more of their money, yes, it's less for government, but there will be more economic activity.
Yes.
And with more economic activity causes when the economy grows, there's more taxes paid because of that economic growth. Now, there have been times in the past when you've heard of tax reform, and I'm talking before Iowa's current effort on this, where you would lean into dynamic scoring as a way to try and make everything balance down the road. It's like, well, we're going to grow the economy by 10, 20, 30% or whatever the number is, so we should be okay with budget deficits. That's not what we're doing here.
No. Everything
that we plan is on a static model. Yeah. However, we also philosophically believe that there will be a corresponding growth in Iowa's economy.
Yes.
We're not using that to justify the tax cuts.
Yeah.
But we're not also going to just say that everything happens in a vacuum, is that, Iowa's economy is going to grow. And there should be, especially in Iowa's sales tax, You let me keep more of my money, I'm going to spend more of my money, and that generates more sales tax down the road. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were tracking with what we were talking about there.
Yeah.
We're not using the dynamic scoring to justify future tax cuts, but we think it is absolutely important to point out that there is a dynamic impact on Iowa's economy.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay,
good.
good.
And that was a good explanation of that. And I think we're seeing, as these policies come out this session, I think, certainly I think that's how the governor is approaching this,
Yes.
and the both the House and Senate are approaching this as well. And I think, like Director Paulson said, there is that organic impact of lower tax rates, and based on just the massive surpluses we have in the Taxpayer Relief Fund, provides that, as you said, we're over collecting, and there's room to return that money to the taxpayer. And so I think there's evidence that we'll present in this paper that shows that Iowa can do this. And really, Iowa, I think, is a national example. I think we are the gold standard because they have done this with prudence. I mean, they've the key to all this, and I thought Majority Leader Jack Whitver had the best reaction to the December REC in his statement when he provided the credit to Iowa's sound financial condition to conservative budgeting, and that's absolutely the cause. And so, it's conservative budgeting, it's conservative revenue estimates, and it's responsible pro-growth tax cuts that have created the situation we're in. And so I think Iowa's doing it right, and a lot of people are taking notice of that across the states.
Absolutely, John. They take notice of it in the national media. We've got a governor that's chairing the Republican Governors Association. We've got the national media coming to Iowa. We got presidential candidates. We have, you're talking with your colleagues around the country in various other think tanks and advocacy groups, and it's been as elevated as high as places like the Wall Street Journal editorial board that have taken notice. And that all comes back to the idea that we're providing the model. I don't believe that by the end of the next legislative session, we'll have the lowest tax rates in the country. But as your article points out, if you look at where we started, which had one of the most progressive high tax regimes in the country, to now becoming one of the best, nobody can hold a candle to that distance traveled of how far we've come on that process and make it work.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And there's an article I hope that will be released today, even on the December REC. But I make a point in there of saying that Iowa has made sure that tax reform has been prudent and not revolutionary, because that's how you want it. And one of the reasons for that is that, Iowa, just like most states, have to balance their budget. And so you cannot just you have to be very careful, and you have to be very prudent in doing this, because you have to make sure that you don't get into a situation like Minnesota or California when you create a deficit situation. And this is not how we've done it. I mean, we have done it very carefully and very, some people might say is, well, why can't you just eliminate the income tax? Well, you just can't do that overnight. Nope. And I know it sounds good on paper, but it takes
sounds
time.
Great on paper, John. Let's not undersell how
that's
great
right.
it is.
Yeah, but it just takes time.
Yeah.
And I think we are doing it responsibly and with great prudence, and it's showing, it's working.
I think that's right, and that's why I think this piece that you've put together is important, to show not only how much has been accomplished, how well it's been done, how balanced and appropriate it is, and what's possible in the future, and what we get for it.
Yes.
Is what Iowans get is they get to keep more of their money, but they're also going to get a stronger, healthier Iowa economy out of it. I really enjoyed the Art Laffer quote that you used in the piece, where you say, when you tax something, you get less of it. And when you tax something less, you get more of it. And so we're trying here. It's not just an article about tax cuts again. there's more. It's really showing what Iowans get for this, or can get for this, or what's possible.
We have a section about budget, talk highlighting reform bill.
Yeah,
That's all part of it.
that's right.
It's all part of bringing greater accountability.
Good. Well, I want folks out there to check out this paper one, so we get it published and out there. We want to make sure we get it done right. And but the REC article will be out. Iowa's tax receipts, Iowa's economy remains strong, and as we've said repeatedly, and we will continue to say repeatedly, it is a tremendous time to be an Iowan, and we are blessed to get to live here. So great. All right. Well, that's all we got for today, John.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends. Don't forget to tune in next time. And with all that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.